going on, guys? It's RPGZ here, coming at you with another video of Slave This, where we go through decks that are pre-made so you can have fun with the game immediately. Something along those lines. We'll workshop the intro. Just for complete transparency, this is the second time I'm recording this video. I did it the first time. I read every card and I just sounded like an idiot. So I'm gonna do something way different now. We're not gonna read every card. We're just gonna talk about what the cards do in a loose term. And then we're going to go through on this deck some cards to substitute in, because some of these cards aren't readily available or that easy to get a hold of, but there are some substitutes that you can pick up along the way, and we're going to go through that. So from spirits, we've got 26 spirits, 7 nexuses, 18 magics. Again, this is from main deck masters. This is the one Dave typically plays on, and it is a banger. That guy does nothing but fight off hurricanes in Florida and cook decks, and he does both those things really well. Florida is still there, I am told. But moving on to the first card, Bark Maiden, a card we will talk about in terms of finding another card to replace it, because this one's kind of hard to find. But Bark Maiden, what does she do? She helps you get ramp when she attacks if conditions are met. She just needs another Leaf Kindred next to her or a Nexus that costs 3 or fewer. Easy enough to set her up for it. And then when she's destroyed, she can also substitute herself out for a cost 5 or fewer spirit without paying its cost. So a way of ramp, and a way of dropping a body or even keeping a body there for defensive purposes and dropping another in its place. Very fun card. Next up's one of the newer cards from BSS 05, Lindell. His whole purpose, ramp your core into the trash for that turn he's played, and then also be a defensive card against Astral, because he only has Astral on the opponent's turn. So if somebody is trying to hit you with Astral, drop him, put him up, and then he'll also ramp your core. Not bad. The card that's going to help you do that, Hidden Leaf Elf. Swift is an ability found in green where you're able to drop spirits at times when you're not typically able to. And Swift has to be paid for and maintained, meaning you need everything in the reserve. You can't pull it from your spirits like other cards are when they're summoned. But when she is summoned, she has the ability of dropping another Leaf Kindred or a Prey Bird spirit. So what you would do is, in a defensive situation, you would Hidden Leaf Elf in. She opens up a wind summoned window for you to drop a Leaf Kindred or Prey Bird, and that's a normal summon. It's not treated like a Swift. So you can pull those cores from other places, drop a Lindell, ramp a core into trash, set up a blocker for Astral, have Lindell get sacked, and boom, you're good to go. Then we've got another card we'll talk about in terms of substituting, Winterfade Budium. Whole point of this card, summon it, get a token. This deck is a green and white deck, if I didn't say it earlier, because re-recording, I'm starting to rush things. Is all about making tokens, ramping, and this deck specifically is very good about keeping your hand full. So drawing in this deck isn't really so much of a problem. You're going to be using tokens a lot, both as a resource and as a way to try and punch your opponent with them and use them in various ways. But she will help get a Leaf Kindred token spirit out, which is one of the new tokens from this box set, and then that comes out exhausted. So there is a catch there. And then when she's destroyed, she'll ramp a core onto said token if she happens to die. So she's a good body for generating and then ramping. Next up, we got Donar. Donar's whole premise in this deck is to eat your tokens to draw you 2 cards. He will do it on the attack step when he swings, or he will do it on the opponent's turn when he blocks, and he can eat a token. When he does it, though, it's not a destruction effect. So if you're like, oh, I'm just going to proc all these destruction-related things, not how it works. It's paying the cost to move the core over. You're paying the token essentially to be able to draw the 2 cards, not ruled as destruction. And then he also has, pretty good armor utility, armor red, so he's not getting blown up right away, armor yellow. And then he is moving right into Gale Ant Shadow. Another Swift Spirit, so playing him in a defensive manner is pretty appropriate. When he's summoned, he will drop an Ant-Man token. His whole thing, besides defense and token generation, is when he attacks, if he has the soul core on him, he will ramp a core onto every one of your tokens. So if you're in a good spot where you have 2, 3, one other token, whatever it might be, besides the one that maybe he summoned, you can ramp pretty heavily in one turn by getting this guy out. So defense, ramp, that's obviously a lot to get and gain in a green-white deck. Sacred Tree Priestess Azuma. Very fun card. During your attack step, if you have no tokens, she'll just poop one out. Boom, you got a token. And then during her attack step, or when this spirit attacks, you can eat the token, actually destroy it this time, to have this card gain another symbol. So it'll hit your opponent for 2 damage as opposed to 1. The utility there is pretty interesting as we talk about the next card here, is this one does specifically state destroy one of your tokens. So if you are in a position where something is going to proc off a token destruction, you'll be able to actually utilize those effects. Missile Time, which is your Ascend Spirit, he's got 2 symbols, meaning he's always hitting for 2. And then he will ascend off one of those tokens. Like I said before, whole premise of this deck, make a token, use it. Make a token, drop a hidden Leaf Elf, summon Leaf Kindred or Prey Bird. This guy, Leaf Kindred, you can literally swift on an opposing turn, drop Leaf Kindred, summon on a token into Missile Time. And then Missile Time, when summoned, summon 2 Mecha Leaf Kindred tokens and ramp a core from the void onto each of them. You eat 1 token, you make 2, you make a big body. And for him, when he sees a token destroyed, which is what Azuma is going to help do, he will select one of your opponent's spirits that cost 6 or fewer and return it to their hand. So it's a good way of opening up the opponent too, because if you were to block, for example, after you did a Hidden Leaf Elf combo, you drop her into Missile Time, and then you block, for example, with a token. If that token dies, you're going to send something back to hand, and that might put your opponent in a weird spot. And you're going to be able to do a lot of those things because you have this really good core generation of getting these cores, and you're going to be able to sustain, typically at most times, a good reduction. He is mainly a white reduction. That is not hard to do in this deck. Probably one of the other cards I'm like super stoked on. When I saw Dave have this card in deck, I was like, Dave, you have to let me share this with the world. Please give me your blessing. And he did. He blessed me. I'm able to talk about it. Snow-Capped Peak Goddess Scotty. I love this card so much, but it's always been hard to find a home for her. She's a 9 cost, 4 reduction. She's a big body, but you know, it's a big body, right? But at the same time, like, where does she go, right? On a white top end when you're not doing all that great and you're just in these weird situations. But she has so much good utility play with green. Green's whole thing, besides token generation, core ramp, and all this other fun stuff, is they can exhaust spirits, right? So like being able to exhaust a spirit is something that Scotty plays into. If you control this spirit and you put a soul core on something else, it also limits targeting options for the opponent because she's a defensive tool, as you're probably reading here on the screen. If she puts the soul core on herself, she becomes the only thing that the opponent's able to select as an actual target. So she eats that ability, or essentially takes it away and restricts the player. And because you're ramping so many cores, even if you have white reduction or don't, playing her is not really a bad thing because you're usually able to get at least 2 reduction in some instances. She's got armor white, so she can't be bounced back to hand in most instances. And then at the start of the step, during the opponent's step, return all of your opponent's exhausted spirits to their hand. If you have Scotty on board, and you can Thorn Prison, which makes your opponents like 2 of their refresh spirits to exhaust them. The opponent's turn ends because they thought they were going to attack you. Now they have 2 less spirits of what they thought they were going to use. You had Scotty on board. Surprise, surprise, they all go back to hand. No longer a defense option for the opponent. They might not be able to bring those spirits back down. It's going to be costly for the opponent to try and set that up next turn. Scotty is a very good tempo card, in my opinion. She's just on the top end, and thanks to green, we're able to get to that top end a lot faster. Next up, we're going to move on to the 7 Nexuses, since we kind of talked about spirits. Really, there's not too much of a combo here I can really think that we haven't talked through. Bark Maiden's good ramp, Lindell's a good defense and ramp, Hidden Leaf Elf is a good defense, helping you set up the board with another card in tow. Winter Fae Buddium is all about we're getting a token, ramping. So you're going to notice right there we've got ramp, 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 body, meets the condition, Leaf Kindred, Leaf Kindred, Leaf Kindred, Leaf Kindred. And then we've got Mecha, so we're really just trying to play in 2 different archetypes, and we're not really branching too much outside that. Scotty, unfortunately, is considered an Ice Princess, so she doesn't really get to use any of the Leaf Kindred or the Mecha subtitles here that we're able to use from other cards. However, Sacred Tree Priestess Azuma is both. She's a Mecha and Leaf Kindred. So that is pretty interesting. And then really the only other type outside of Scotty is Carapace for great Gale Ninja and Shadow, but he does what the deck is looking for. He generates a token, he ramps when he attacks. That's everything we want. And then Mistletoe doesn't care what token he ascends on. He just wants a token, and he's good to go. So very good synergy throughout this entire thing, and the power curve makes a lot of sense. Next up, Nexus. Sacred Totem Poles. Sacred Tree Totem Pole is only a 1 copy. It makes it so if the opponent swings with small cost spirits, they have to exhaust something else. So that's really good. And then also on your Ascend, so essentially in this deck, it's Mistletoe. If you win the battle when you go to attack and the other opponent, or excuse me, the opponent blocked with something smaller, there's punch through, which means they're still going to take at least 1 damage from that. So that's really interesting if the attacking spirit is higher BP and also is a sub. 1 copy of it's mainly just cheeky tech. I mean, we could sub that in and out for something else, but just something to keep in mind. Next up, a big staple in this, Infinity Mothership, 2 copies. You're able to refresh your cores, get into a better stance during the attack step. So your opponent wants to attack, all the cores you use to set up your turn come back over to your reserve. You're able to use those again. A very good defense tool, and then also it's level 2, being able to ramp an additional core if you have a Mecha Spirit. Like we talked about, you have Mecha with Donar. Donar's eating all your tokens usually to help you draw in one way or another. Azuma's going to help you make a token, which is also another Mecha Leaf Kindred. But again, it's Mecha. This is Mecha. A lot of this stuff is Mecha. So being able to pop the level 2 ability on Infinity Mothership and grab another core, really, really good. Your biggest token generator, besides some of the other stuff, the spirits and some of the magics we'll talk about, is going to be Sacred Wood Research Lab. When placed, you get a token, Mecha Leaf Kindred. Then, if you have the cores on, you can summon an additional one of the same thing, and then that card's just exhausted. If this card sees you generate a token at any point while it's level 2, if it's not exhausted, it'll let you grab another one. So for example, this card's sitting up, you swift in Gale Ant Shadow. If you get Ant Shadow, he drops an Ant token and this thing's up, you can exhaust it, drop another Ant-Man token. So then you're setting up again for the future turn. Both the token and the second token you generate is going to be exhausted. But it does pull a core in from the reserve or from the trash to make sure that you sustain that token. So more cores into play is awesome, and it's free as long as the cores are on the Nexus. So that's sick. That's it for Nexuses. So being able to set yourself up and in a good position is what these Nexuses are for. Sacred Totem Pole, yeah, sure, if you wanted to throw in something else, play around with it, see what you'd like, but I think it's still pretty cool, very cheeky. Next up, the 18 Magics, 4 copies, as always, Absolute Ice Shield. I think it's safe to say we're going to talk about that one a lot. If you don't know what these cards do or want more time with them and you don't want to pause the screen, please hop on over to bssdb.dev to look at the cards yourself, play around with them, construct your own decks. A really good website and tool we utilize here, as well as most BSS players. Star Blessed Draw, no-brainer. Pay for it, which you have a lot of cores for. Draw 2. If you can proc the burst, draw another 2 for free. Suppression's a very good anti-aggro tool, as well as just catching the opponent off guard. If your stuff's exhausted and you don't have any defenders and your opponent thinks they're safe, pop a suppression, pay the soul core. Your bodies that are now exhausted can now block. And a lot of times your opponent might not expect it, or they did it on purpose to fish it out of your hand, just depends. We've already talked about Thorn Prison, but it's a very good card. Being able to select 2 targets and exhaust them, tell them, hey, I'm either going to punch through because I can cast it in main, meaning you can set up for the attack, or you can do it in a flash response and also just exhaust 2 spirits. Also good for the defense, like we talked about. Scotty will turn those exhausted spirits around and bounce them to hand. Very, very nice. Dream Bomb, baby. Staple for white, I feel like. You get hit, return a Nexus to hand, pay for it, return a spirit to hand of your choosing. A very, very good card that'll set the opponent back. And then this is probably the other big staple in the deck is Seed Bullet. When you lose life, which is super common, happens all the time in BSS, you're going to get smacked in the face every once in a while. You can just make a Mecha Leaf Kindred token. So you can already set up for future reduction after you get smacked. That's awesome. Then you can select one of your opponent's spirits and return it to their hand. Another way of bouncing. If it's exhausted, send it on back. Set back your opponent with having to pay for something else or try to summon that card again. And then into the sideboard, very thought out. In BSS, you can use up to 10 cards in your sideboard. Dave says, nah, forget that. I'm just going to use 5. Cool. Good job, Dave. Gale Ninja Ant Shadow. We got 1 copy. Namengard, very big staple in white, and because you have white reduction as well as so much core ramp, getting this guy out really isn't difficult. And if you're playing against an opponent that is just constantly sacking your spirits, you might as well make them pay for it. If this guy dies, you will get 3 cards, and you will be able to get 3 cores. Ramp and draw, baby. And he's very good on the defense because he'll proc a refresh step on his own. So after the attack step's over, you go into your end step, all your cards stand back up, your spirits, all your nexuses stand back up, and all your cores in the trash come over. You refresh, gives you the whole refresh step on everything. Extra copy of Thorn Prison, like we talked about, very good utility card, and then an extra copy of Seed Bullet. This is the normal art. Very, very good looking card. And then that's it. So that is Dave's green and white deck. Now, to move on really quick into the substitution cards. So Bark Maiden, Lucerium, hard card to get a hold of. I get it. What can I do instead? I got 2 cards for you. Let me show you what they are. Matingale, first one. This guy is in the starter deck. When summoned, he will be exhausted, but you can place a core from the void onto it. So it's just free ramp for dropping a 3-cost green spirit. Bark Maiden has a little bit of a condition to ramp, so that's one of those options you could do. And then the other one is Worker Ant-Man, also a 3-cost, but when he attacks, he will get you that ramp immediately into the reserve. So if you can't get a hold of Bark Maiden, you can put these guys in, and it doesn't feel too wonky, I promise. And then you're able to do that instead if Bark Maiden's too much to get a hold of or just a big headache to try and hunt those down. Next up was the Winter Fae Budium. Really what you're looking for here is anything that just, you drop this card and you can just summon a token. What I was playing with was this card, Clone Artist Gadagiri. When summoned, makes an Ant-Man token. Again, Mistletoe doesn't care about what he ascends on, just as long as it's a token. Ant Shadow is going to help you ramp onto other tokens. Donar is going to eat tokens to draw cards. Does a similar effect. It's in the same realm of cost. He's 5, 3 green reduction. Budium is a 4, 1 green, 1 white reduction. Typically, when you drop these guys, you're going to be in a similar circumstance where you might have favorable reduction one way or the other. That's why Budium's kind of fun with her 2-color reduction. But this card serves the same purpose, and he will also get you another thing to use in the defending against Astral, because level 1 during the opponent's turn, he does have Astral. This is what I was playing with before I got my Winter Fae copies, and it worked out really well. Like, I really didn't notice too much of a difference. So yeah, that is where I'm at with Dave's deck. And this deck, like I said, I've sleeved it up. I have thrown hands with it in the Discord channels, which again, if you're ever curious, I want to play more BSS, I don't know where to go. Description down below in the video, you can check out all the links to all the BSS Discords that I like and support. And you can click on one of those and join. You're also going to see the main deck Masters channel down below. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that other fun stuff. If you have any other recommendations on deck builds or things you would like to see, please comment them down below. I will see if anybody's got a deck that they're willing to share, since I do not cook all of these. I do not have enough time in the day to make all these really cool decks. I do have one that I've had sleeved up for a while that we will talk about later. I don't want to spoil anything, and I don't know which one we're going to talk about next. In the meantime, that was another episode. I gotta get better at this. That was another episode of Sleeve This. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.